Hello viewers and my students, welcome to my channel. In this video, I am going to discuss the famous poem of John Keats, Ode to a Nightingale, its text and annotation. So, let's begin. At first, about the poet. John Keats' lifespan from 31st October 1795 to 23rd February 1821. That is, Keats was alive only for 25 years. Better known as poet of beauty, was the last among the romantic poets to be born and the first among them to die. His contribution in English literature is immense. Keats gave up his medical profession in 1817 and devoted himself to the writing of verses. And after giving up medical profession, he started writing poetry. Keats was greatly supported by his friend poet Leigh Hunt. He was greatly influenced by Edmund Spenser, John Milton, William Hazlitt, and many more. He composed most of his greatest poems in the year 1819. That is, the year 1819 is very important because Keats was able to put down or complete most of his works in this very year. After the tragic death of his brother Tom Keats in 1818, we know that his brother Tom Keats died in December 1818. Keats went to live with his friend Charles Armitage Brown at Hampstead. He met Fanny Brown and fell madly in love with her. Keats is noted for sensuousness. Sensuousness, we know that it's one of the prominent characteristics of his poetry. Sensuousness means while going through his poetry, most of the senses get active. Matthew Arnold says, Keats was abundantly and enchantingly sensuous. His works are also noted for escapism. Why escapism? Because unlike Shelley, Keats was not preoccupied with the contemporary issues, but rather he preferred a world of romance, medieval elements, imagery, and Hellenism or Greek elements. And regarding the predominance of Greek aspects, Shelley rightly says he was a Greek. Then, in February 1820, he suffered a serious hemorrhage of lungs. That is, we know that Keats had some problem of consumption or tuberculosis. And his brother Tom Keats also died of tuberculosis or consumption. And his mother also died of the same disease. The doctor warned him that another winter in England would be fatal for him. Hence, he was taken to Italy under the care of his friend Joseph Severn. So Joseph Severn was his faithful friend with whom he went to Italy. In Rome, Keats died of tuberculosis on February 23rd, 1821. So Keats died at an early age of 25 only. On his tomb are carved, according to his own request, "Here lies one whose name was written water." So this is the line which Keats himself decided. Here lies one whose name was written water. This is the epitaph or tombstone of John Keats. And in this tombstone, his name was not carved. Rather, this line was carved. And it was written according to his own wish. Actually, Keats found this line in the play Philoster by Beaumont and Fletcher. Now, about his work. The important works of Keats are: number 1, on first looking into Chapman's Homer, it was a sonnet. Then, Endymion, another poem, an important one. And in this very poem, we find the famous line, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." Then, Isabella or the Pot of Basil, it's a narrative poem. Then, 6 Odes written in 1819, and we know that 1819, the year is very important for Keats because he wrote most of his works in this very year. And 6 odes, that is Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on Indolence, Ode on Melancholy, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to Psyche, and to Autumn or Ode to Autumn. These 6 odes were written in the year 1819. Next, Lamia, it's also a narrative poem. Then, The Eve of St. Agnes. Then, Hyperion, 1820, it's an incomplete epic poem. And then, The Fall of Hyperion, a dream, and it was published in 1856, that is posthumously. Now, about the poem, that is about the poem Ode to a Nightingale. The poem was composed between April and May, that is in the season of spring in 1819. The poem was first published in the same year, in July 1819, in the quarterly magazine named Annals of the Fine Arts. Then, Keats wrote this ode when he was in the house of his friend Charles Browne at Hampstead. And we know that Keats was with his friend Charles Browne at Hampstead, and this poem was written when he was at Hampstead. Browne himself says, in the spring of 1819, a nightingale had built her nest near my house. Keats felt a tranquil and continual joy in her song, that is the song of the nightingale, and one morning he took his chair from the breakfast table to the grass plot under a palm tree where he sat for 2 or 3 hours. When he came into the house, I perceived he had some scraps of paper in his hands, that is, he was able to complete the poem. Then, Ode to a Nightingale is a perfect ode, and we know that it is one of the immortal creations of John Keats. It is in the form of an address to the bird, that is, it addresses the bird nightingale. It's lyrical in essence. The poem expresses the passion and imagination as found in an ode. It has a single but dignified and exalted theme. Then, the poem deals with the contrast or dichotomy between evanescence and permanence, or mortality and immortality. Very important theme. Immortality of the nightingale as symbolized by its song, that is, the bird is not immortal but his song is immortal, like Shelley's To a Skylark. And the mortality of human beings, that is, same theory, art is long, life is short. Art means here the song of the nightingale, and life means human life. It also contrasts the happiness and joy of the bird with the sufferings, sorrows and afflictions of the human world, where youth, beauty and love are all transitory. Next, this ode is full of autobiographical touches. We know that one of the romantic traits is autobiographical elements of subjectivity, and herein also in this poem we find subjective aspects. Poet's own experience of financial difficulty, sufferings, pain and death, these are to be found in this poem. Then his younger brother Tom Keats died on December 1st, 1818. His unsuccessful love for Fanny Brown, all this lend a profound tone of sadness in the poem. Then, the poem is noted for Hellenism or Greek spirit and sensuousness. Keats alludes classical mythology. We find the reference of classical mythology in Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, then Dryad, then Flora, Hippocrene and Bacchus. So these all are the instances of classical mythology or classical allusion. The poet's aesthetic sense is also prominent. Then, Ode to a Nightingale consists of 8 stanzas. Each stanza has 10 lines. The lines are in iambic pentameter with occasional variation. Why variation? The 8th line is a trimeter. So, we find that the poem consists of 8 stanzas, and each stanza has 10 lines. So, total 80 lines. and the lines are in iambic pentameter except the 8th line or the line number 8, and the line number 8 of each stanza is in iambic trimeter. Then the rhyme scheme of each stanza of the poem is ABAB, CDE, CDE. So this is the rhyme scheme. Now the text, stanza 1, first 5 lines at first. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense. My heart aches. That is, the poet felt a sensation of pain in his heart. Why? Because of excessive joy. Why excessive joy? We know that the occasion of the poem is the song of the nightingale. The poet heard the song of the nightingale, and after hearing this song, he felt extreme joy. And this acts or pain is the result of this joy. That is, he felt pain in his heart because of excessive joy. Wordsworth calls it aching joy. Same term we find in Tinterneve. Spencer also says a painful pleasure turns to pleasing pain. And then a drowsy numbness pains my sense. That is, the poet feels a sleepy feelings of dullness, or his senses get benumbed. As though of hemlock I had drunk. As though means as if. That is, it seems to the poet that he had drunk hemlock, although he did not actually drink, but it seems only. And hemlock, we know that it's a kind of poison, or the hemlock is a poisonous plant. The great Greek philosopher Socrates was compelled to drink hemlock and he died. Taken in small doses, it causes intoxication. So the poet feels benumbed, or his senses get benumbed or dull, and it seems that he has drunk hemlock or emptied some dull opiate. It may also be that he had taken opium, opiate which comes from opium, to the drains. To the drains means to the full. And dull opiate, it's a rhetorical term because opiate is not dull, but it makes one's brain dull after taking it. So rhetorically, this is an example of transferred epithet or hyperless, because opiate or opium is not dull, but it makes the brain of the person who takes it dull. 1 minute passed. Lethe ward had sunk. Now it seems to him that he had sunk in the Lethe water. Lethe, we know that according to Greek mythology, Lethe is the river of forgetfulness, and this is the river of Hades. And according to Greek mythology, human beings must cross this river before coming to this earth, that is before birth, and after going to another world, that is after death. So herein we find an allusion of Greek mythology, or classical or Greek allusion. Then, 'tis not through envy of thy happy lot. 'Tis means here the reaction of the poet. That is the condition of the poet. That is the cause of feeling pain or sense of benumbness. That is the cause of his pain is not the joyous song of the bird. So happy lot means happy song. Keats considers the nightingale as a happy bird. However, traditionally we know that the bird is considered to be melancholy one, but being too happy in thine happiness. So the poet is also equally happy with the happiness of the bird. The poet feels pain from the excess of gladness. So the cause of pain is not the jealousy but the happiness. That is, he doesn't envy the bird for her power of singing so sweetly, but he is too happy with her happiness. That thou means here bird, address, because it's an ode we know. Light-winged dryad, the bird is called light-winged, having wings that is light, and the term light suggests its quick movement. So the movement of the bird is very quick. And dryad, herein also we find classical allusion, because according to Greek mythology, dryad is the wood nymph or fairy or elf of the trees to which the bird is compared. That is, the nightingale is compared to the dryad of the trees, that is, nymph of the trees. So, Greek or classical allusion in some melodious plot, that is, plot or surrounding of the bird is resounding with the song of the nightingale. That is, the total area or the entire area is resounding with the song of the bird. And herein also we find rhetoric, and rhetorically this is an example of transferred epithet or hypeles, because the plot is not melodious but the song of the bird is melodious. So the epithet or adjective is transferred from song to plot. Next, of beech and green, the area is full of green beech trees. That is why beech and green. In endymion we find beech and wreath, beech and tree, wreath green, etc. So herein also we find sensuousness, color, green color, and shadows numberless, and the shadows are there. Singest of summer in full-throated is, and the bird sings spontaneously, welcoming the summer, one of the best seasons of England. The term full-throated relates personal elements. Why personal elements? Because kids had frequently suffered from throat problem during the previous 6 months. So, full-throated, it may be a personal reference. Next, stanza 2, first 5 lines. Oh, for a draught of vintage. Oh here means how I wish. A draught of vintage. For a draught means as much as one can, and vintage means wine. That is, here kids longs for a drink. Why he longs for a drink? Because he wants to join the world of the bird or the world of the nightingale, and in order to transport himself he needs a medium, and as a medium he takes here wine that had been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth. And in context of wine, Keats describes the wine in details, and it is not the normal wine but the special kind of wine that had been cooled a long age. Cooled a long age means wine is said to be tastier and refined the older and cooler it is. Deep delved earth means underground cellar. Tasting of flora and the country green. And in this context, Keats wishes the wine having association of flora. Flora we know, the Roman goddess of flower, and the merry festivities celebrated in honor of flora by the village people. So herein also we find classical or Roman allusion. Dance and Provençal song, and in this context Keats mentioned dance and Provençal song, the song of the people of Provence. Provence we know, southern portion of France. Provence is a grape producing and winemaking district. And sunburned mirth. Mirth and enjoyment of the people of the sunburned countries like Provence. These people exposed to the sun and looked brown skin because of their participation in open air, sports and dancing. So rhetorically again we find hypeles or transferred epithet, because the epithet or adjective sunburnt is transferred from people to mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south. And Keats wishes for a full cup of wine of warm south or southern Europe, that is countries like Provence. And again rhetorically this is an example of metonymy. Why metonymy? Because warm south is substituted for wine produced in southern France, so place for its production. Rhetorically metonymy. Full of the true, the blushful hypocrite. Full of the true means truly, that is the wine Keats longs for, it is truly the blushful. And here Keats describes the color. Blushful means the red color of wine, and this red color is impliedly compared to the face of a blushing girl. So sensuousness as well as metaphor. And blushful hypocrite. Hypocrite, and herein also classical allusion. According to Greek or classical mythology, Hippocrene is the name of a fountain on Mount Helicon, the haunt of the Muses. It is said that this hippocrene is produced by the hoof of Pegasus, and Pegasus is the winged horse of the sun god. The water of this fountain gives poetic inspiration to those who drink them. Kids wants to drink such wine which will have the poetic efficiency of hippocrene. So here we find Hellenism or Greek or classical allusion. Then with beaded bubbles winking at the brim. Here kids visualizes a picture of the cup of wine which has bubbles looking like beads on the surface of the cup. These bubbles twinkle at the edge of the glass before subsiding. So kids says sensuousness. And in this line we also find sensuousness because we can visualize the picture of the cup of wine. And purple stained mouth, that is the wine will leave stain on the mouth. So again we find sensuousness or visual imagery. That might I drink. So these were the descriptions of special kind of wine Keats longs for, or Keats mentions such kind of wine, not the ordinary wine. Why he would drink wine? Leave the world unseen. Keats wants to disappear from the world without being seen by anybody in order to join the world of the bird. Of course, he wants to escape from the world of sufferings and sorrows. Thus we find here a note of escapism. Why escapism? Because Keats wants to get rid of this actual world. Actual world means world of sufferings and sorrows. And he wants to join the world of imagination. That is the world of the bird or nightingale. And with thee fade away into the dim forest. Keats wants to be lost in the world of the nightingale. This is for the poet an ideal world without suffering and sorrows. So stanza 2 completed. Now stanza 3. Fade far away, dissolve and quite forget. Keats wishes to forget the miseries of this world by retiring or transporting himself into the dim forest or the world of the nightingale. What thou among leaves hast never known, that is, the bird has never known the weariness, the fever and the fret, that is, sorrows and sufferings, which human beings suffer in this earth. Here where men sit and hear each other's gone. Here means on this earth. Here men sit and hear each other's gone. That is, here human beings discuss the sorrows and sufferings with each other. Where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs. Here palsy means paralysis or old age. Here it is personified as a feeble old man. So personification, because palsy and abstraction it is personified. Old man with a few grey hairs hobble along trembling and tottering. Thus this line gives a dismal picture or imagery of this world, and here we find a vivid picture of this world of sufferings and sorrows, where youth grows pale, spectre thin and dies. And in this art youth can't last long. Here he gradually becomes pale, then spectre thin like ghosts, and ultimately dies. And in this line, Keats remembers the untimely death of his younger brother Tom Keats, who died of consumption 5 months before the poem was written. So here we find personal or autobiographical elements. And rhetorically this line is an example of polysyndeton. Why polysyndeton? Because and connective conjunctions are repeatedly used, and again it is also synecdoche. Why synecdoche? Because abstract for concrete. Here youth means young men, and again climax. Pale, spectre thin, dies. The words are placed in an ascending order of importance, so that the most important one, that is dies, comes last. Wordsworth says in Excursion in this context, while man grows old and dwindles and decays. Next, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and laden-eyed despair. That is, all the serious thoughts on this earth lead to despair, which make the eyes downcast with the weight of sorrow. That is, in this earth, everything is full of sorrows and sufferings, where beauty can't keep her lustrous eyes. That is, in this world, the charm of a beautiful woman is also transitory, because her shiny eyes fade away with the passage of time. And here beauty, it's an abstraction. Here beauty means beautiful women or beautiful girls. So again rhetorically, synecdoche, abstract for concrete. Beauty means beautiful women or girl. Or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Even new love affair is transitory on this earth. It doesn't last more than 1 or 2 days, and the lovers pine. And in this line, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow, Keats thinks of his own unsuccessful love affair with Fanny Brown. So here we find autobiographical or personal elements. And this line is also rhetorically synecdoche. Why synecdoche? Because new love here means young lovers. So abstract for concrete, equal to synecdoche. So completed stanza 3. Now stanza 4. First 5 lines. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his parts. Away. And here Keats bids goodbye to wine. Why does he bid goodbye? Because it is not strong enough to transport him to the world of the nightingale. That's why he bids goodbye to wine. Because for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his parts. That is, not by wine. And Bacchus, we know, the god of wine, according to Greek or classical mythology. Keats here rejects the idea of transporting himself to the world of the nightingale with the help of wine, as indicated by his giving up the idea of riding on the chariot of Bacchus drawn by leopards. According to classical or Greek mythology, Bacchus is the god of wine. He is represented riding in a chariot pulled by leopards. So, here we find classical or Greek allusion, or it's an example of Keats' use of Hellenism. Again, this line alludes Titian's famous painting Bacchus and Ariadne, and this painting is preserved in the British National Gallery. In the painting, the chariot of Bacchus is represented as drawn by leopards. Keats himself admired this picture very much. Actually, Bacchus is represented driving on a chariot drawn by tiger, not by leopards. So, here we find Bacchus and his parts, classical or Greek allusion. But on the viewless wings of poesy. This is the main idea or very important line, and ultimately Keats finds out the way to transport himself to the world of the nightingale, and he gives up all the mediums, hemlock, opium, lide water, wine, and ultimately the means he adopts, that is viewless wings of poesy. That is, Keats at last finds out the means of transport, and it is the inspiration of poetic imagination by which a man can fly anywhere, because imagination can transport one to any place. Though the dull brain perplexes and returns, but pure intellect and reason hinders the march of imagination. So he feels puzzled and returns or is unable to move. Already with thee, but imagination has transported the poet to the world of the nightingale. Tender is the night, and in the world of the nightingale, the night is tender or mild. And haply, the queen moon is on her throne. And here, haply means here perhaps. Why perhaps? Because the poet can't see the moon from the shady grove, because he is now in the world of the nightingale, which is dim forest, and from here he can't see the moon clearly. That's why haply, perhaps. The queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry face, and herein we find a splendid imagery. Here the moon or Diana, the moon goddess, is imagined as the queen of heaven or the sky, sitting on a throne. And the fairy light of the small stars surrounding the moon are imagined as her attendants. So they are called starry phase. Phase means attendants. And from star, starry. So here we find mythical imagery or classical allusion. But here there is no light. Here means the world of the nightingale, because it's the dim forest. So the world of the nightingale is in darkness. Save what from heaven is, with the breezes blown through Bhardura's glooms and winding moji ways. That is, occasional light enters through the zigzag ways of moss-covered trees when the wind shakes the leaves. And through Bhardura's gloom. Bhardura's gloom means darkness caused by the verdant or green leaves of trees. This is the imaginary world of the nightingale where the poet is transported. So completed stanza 4. Now stanza 5, first 5 lines. I can't see what flowers are at my feet. The poet is unable to find out the flowers under his feet because the place is in darkness. Because it is dim forest. That's why he can't see the flowers under his feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. He also can't see the soft scented flowers hanging from the branches of the trees. And incense hangs. This term reminds us the same idea in Kubla Khan, where Coleridge says incense bearing tree, but in embalmed darkness. But embalmed means scented, and darkness that which prevails in the world of the nightingale, that is in scented or fragranted darkness. Guess the poet is able to conjecture is sweet. Sweet means sweet smelling flower. And this term embalmed darkness is a death image. Why death image? Because darkness filled with balm or fragrance of flowers. Darkness is here imagined as a corpse or dead body. A dead body is preserved with aromatic drugs or perfumes. Likewise, darkness is preserved with fragrance of the flowers. So, here we find death imagery. Wherewith this seasonable month endows. Seasonable month means the month of May, in which various seasonal flowers blossom and nature is endowed. The grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild. So, these are the various flowers and trees. White hawthorn, so these are the flowers. White hawthorn, white blossom of the rose family, and the pastoral eglantine, a kind of wild rose with fragrant leaves, and then fast fading violets, that is the violet which fades early, covered up in leaves, the flower is covered up with leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming mask rose. And mid-May's eldest child, here we find personification, the mask rose blooms in the middle of May. So it is called eldest child of mid-May. So rhetorically personification. And coming mask rose, the word coming means about to bloom. Full of dewy wine. Dewy wine means dew like honey. Honey is described as wine. The murmurous haunt of flies on summer's eve. The fragranted musk rose filled with honey attracts the bees, and the whole place is full of their buzzing. Thus, the line conveys the sense of sound and music. Actually, the whole stanza is full of sensuousness because here most of the senses get active. So, this stanza is full of sensuousness. Then, stanza 6. Darkling, I listen. Darkling means in the dark, adverb. This word is related to back formation. Some other words are sidling, groveling, etc. By subtracting ing, new word or new verb darkle is formed. Milton uses this word in the context of Nightingale's song in Paradise Lost Book 3. As the wakeful bird sings darkling and in shadiest covered heat. Then And for many a time I have been half in love with his full death. And many a time, for many a time I have been half in love. Half in love means the poet seems to be as much in love with life as with death. And the death he prefers is obviously is full death. That is death that brings ease or relief from the miseries of life. The same idea is expressed in Keats's sonnet, Why Did I Love Tonight? And there we find verse, fame and beauty are intense indeed, but death intenser. Death is life's high need. So, here we find the same idea. Called him soft names. Him means death. He addresses death affectionately. Keats invokes easy, peaceful death to come upon him in many meditative verses like Why Did I Love Tonight? To take into the air my quiet breath. The poet loves painless death which would cause no pain. Now more than ever seems it rich to die. After reaching the world of the nightingale, the poet is extremely happy. Now he yearns to die or wishes death before pain comes back. It is supremely satisfying for him to die. Death is to him a luxurious feat. That's why he says, now more than ever it seems rich to die. So death is here compared to a luxurious feast. So imagery. Rich is a colloquial term in this line. In Ode on Melancholy, Keats says, some rich anger. To seize upon the midnight with no pain. To seize means to cease to exist, that is die. The poet wants death or longs for death in this very night, and this death would bring him no pain. Rather, it would relieve him from the miseries of the world. While thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. That is, even after the death of the poet, the nightingale would sing with same ecstasy or same joyful song. Still would thou song. Still means even after my death, you will go on singing. And I have ears in vain. Why in vain? Because the physical ears would cease to function after his death. That is, he can no longer hear the song. After death, he would not be able to hear the joyous song of the bird. So, the song then would, to thy high requiem, become a sword. Requiem means song of lament. That is, after his death, the song will be a hymn for his own soul. The contrast between art and life is prominent here. Art means the song of the bird which is immortal, and life which is mortal. That is the life. The poet is subject to mortality, whereas the bird is immortal because it would go on singing even after his death. And then his body would become a sword. Sword means as insensible as a clod of earth. After death, his body will be a sword. Then stanza 7. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. That is, Keats addresses the bird, the nightingale, as immortal bird. And the line is apparently paradoxical, for how a bird can be immortal, but the inner meaning suggests that the bird is not immortal, but the song is immortal. The bird as a type is referred to here. The songbird is not immortal, but the bird song is. When the individual nightingale dies, its song is taken up by its successors for generations to come, and in this way it gets immortality. And rhetorically, this line is an example of epigram. Why epigram? Because the line is apparently striking or shocking, but there is an inner significance, and the inner significance is that the song of the bird is immortal because its generation would take up the song for ages. And again, it's also an example of synecdoche. Why synecdoche? Because here we find whole for the bird. Immortal bird. Bird is said, but only nightingale is meant. So whole for the bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. Hungry means dissatisfied. And in this line, Keats satirizes human generation. Why is human generation? Because unlike human generation, the bird is not engaged in the struggle for existence. Their generations carry out the same tradition. As a result, their art or song is immortal. Here Keats satirizes human generation, always dissatisfied, because human beings are found in a competition. The voice I heard this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. That is, the song of the nightingale is from the ancient time, and it was heard by an emperor, that is king, and clown, ordinary person. Perhaps the self same song, that is this very song of the nightingale, found a path that is impressed through the sad heart of Ruth. And Ruth is a biblical character, and Ruth is the character of the book of Ruth, Old Testament. So here we find biblical allusion. Ruth is the principal character of the book of Ruth of the Old Testament. She was a Moabite married to a Jew. After the death of her husband, she migrated with her mother-in-law Naomi to Judah in Palestine. Her heart was sad as she was far away from her home and parents. So we find biblical allusion. Again, here Keats draws a romantic picture of Ruth. Why romantic? Because she is standing in a cornfield with tears in her eyes. Her homesick heart is comforted by the song of the nightingale. So this is the romantic picture. She is comforted by the song of the nightingale. The line reminds us Wordsworth's famous poem The Solitary Reaper, where the nightingale's song consoled the weary travelers. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travelers in some shady hunt among Arabian sands. So, in this line we find biblical allusion. Ruth is a biblical character. When sick for home, why homesick? Because she was in a foreign country. She stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same means the same song of the nightingale that oft times, that on many a occasion hath charmed the magic casements opening on foam. That is, charmed or comforted the listeners or the captive princess sitting near the magic window of the castle. And herein we also find allusion of medieval romances, of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. These lands are not the countries where the fairies live, these are the rather legendary countries of romance. So, Keats means to say that the song of the nightingale is from time immemorial, from ancient times, from the time of history, and the same song prevails even at present. Stanza 8 or the last stanza, forlorn, that is lonely, desolate and unhappy. Such words seem to the poet as reality. So, this is not the imagination or the ideal world, and this word reminds him the world of reality, the favorite weariness. The very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul self. That is, it reminds the poet to return from the dreamland of the nightingale to the actual world. Soul self means real life of everyday existence. That is, from imagination to reality. So, he bids goodbye, adieu, goodbye to fancy or imagination. The fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do. Fancy cannot make the poet forget the realities of life for long. So the illusion produced by imagination is evanescent. And again we find personification. Fancy, an abstraction, it is personified by the pronoun she. So we find here personification. And fancy is also called deceiving elf. Fancy is like a fairy or elf that deceives human beings. So deceiving elf is also rhetorically metaphor, comparison, because fancy is compared to an elf or fairy. So the poet bids goodbye, adieu, adieu. Thy plaintive anthem fades. That is, the plaintive song or melancholy song of the nightingale fades or vanishes. And herein we also find contradiction. Why contradiction? Because now the song of the nightingale appears to the poet as sad or plaintive. He describes it before as in such an ecstasy, and he calls it ecstatic song, joyous song, and this change shows the change of his mood. In the Solitary Reaper, Wordsworth describes the song of the bird or the nightingale. Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow, and this plaintive song vanishes or fades over the past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside. And now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. That is, the song gradually fades as the bird flies over the different places like meadows, still stream, hillside, and at last it becomes almost inaudible. And the poet is at last in a confusion. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Kids can't decide whether all the experiences with the nightingale was merely a dream in sleep or a daydream or reverie or idle fancy. Fled is that music. That is, with the disappearance of the bird, the music also disappears or fades. Do I wake or sleep? This is the question or interrogation on the part of the poet. The poet asks this question because he is unable to understand his condition at present. This is also a conflict between imagination and reality, vision and daydream, or a flurry of confusion with which the poem ends. The ending also suggests that Keats, an escapist poet, can't escape to the dreamland of romance for a long time, and he has to come back to reality ultimately, because his excursion to the world of the nightingale is for time being, transitory, and he can't stay permanently, and he had to return to the real world or the world of favor, fate, and wordiness. So he can't be called an escapist. So completed up to 8 stanza. Now iambic pentameter and trimeter. We know that the poem consists of 8 stanzas, and each stanza has 10 lines, and all the lines are written in iambic pentameter except the 8th line, and the line number 8 is in iambic trimeter. So let's explain iambic pentameter and trimeter. At first, iambic pentameter. So this is the first line of the first stanza. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains. So here we find total 10 syllables. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains. Total 10 syllables. Next, to put accent. And here the second syllables of each foot are accented. Heart, accented syllable, then and, then drow, then numb, then pains. And in this line we find total 5 feet. This is vertical line, and within this vertical line there are 2 syllables, and these 2 syllables, it is called foot, singular foot, plural feet. So here we find 5 feet. 5 feet equal to pentameter. And unaccent accent, this is called iambus, and iambus is the noun form adjective iambic. So together iambic pentameter. Now line number 8, it is in iambic trimeter. Let's explain. In some melodious plot. So here we find total 6 syllables. In some melodious, this is trisyllabic word, plot. So total 6 syllables. Now we should put accent upon the accented syllable. In some, accented. Melodious, low, this syllable is accented. Then plot, accented. So here we find total 6 syllables, and the second one is accented. And within vertical lines there are 2 syllables, and foot, total there are 3 feet. 1, 2, 3. So 3 feet equal to trimeter, and unaccent accent, unaccent accent, unaccent accent equal to iambus. So together iambic trimeter. So clear? Iambic pentameter and iambic trimeter. Next, Now let's explain the rhyme scheme. We know that the poem has the rhyme scheme ABAB, CDE, CDE. So let's explain. Pains, it's A. Then drunk, different sound, so it's B. Then drains, pain, drains, same syllable, same sound, so also A. Then sunk, drunk, sunk, B. So ABAB. Then lot, new one, so C. Then last syllable, happiness, ness, new one, D. Then trees, new one, E, so CD. Then plot, lot, plot, so C. Then less, ness, less, D. Then is, trees, is, E. So what do we find? ABAB, CDE, CDE. So this is the rhyme scheme. So completed.